and welcome to Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is Dog Nation Recruiting Insider Jeff Sintel, and we are going to have to put something on the screen because I got an issue with my microphone that needs to be fixed right off the top of the program. So, Jeff, why don't you talk for a minute, and I'll get the microphone fixed and taken care of here.
All right, guys, this is the part of our show where we're going to call it a filibuster segment. It's brought to you by those good folks at Kroger. You've already gotten your Happy Easter candy. You've already gotten your Easter pails and your Paws eggs. And now, a little bit of glimpse of what our show is going to look like today. We're going to talk about G-Day and the top targets, those five-star top targets, who would come next. We're going to have an interview with new recent Georgia commitment, the most newly minted Georgia commitment. That would be Akiola Ogunbiyi, the four-star offensive guard out of Texas. And we're going to go top targets. We're going to have hurry up. We're going to have our six-pack trivia, a little twist in our six-pack trivia. We're going to give you guys a little bit more extra for your money today. And with that, my man is back on the mic.
All right, let's try this one more time off the top of the program. Hello, everybody. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. It is great to have you, Jeff Sintel. Jeff, thanks for setting the menu involved in everything that's going to be happening today. But as you might imagine, a lot of the conversation on today's program is going to be about the long list of very impressive visitors that were on hand for G-Day on Saturday at Sanford Stadium, and maybe the most impressive of those, because of the work required for him to get to Athens and for UGA to get him on campus, might have been five-star running back Kendall Milton. Jeff, before we kind of dive into this a little bit more deeply, how about just kind of a general overview from you of kind of everything that you saw, the guys that were there and kind of everything going on there?
Okay, the first thing to really think about there is, sure, it was another visit for another spring game, glorified scrimmage. The Georgia fans were great, even in the weather and even in the dreary, sloggy conditions. The main thing I noticed by watching a lot of guys, you saw Keely Ringo and Kirby Smart, very important parts of the pregame. He got some time with the head coach of the Georgia Bulldogs. But the main thing, which we'll explore perhaps through the context of our show today, is the sense of camaraderie. A sense of, okay, Clemson's arming up with a lot of dudes. So how do these guys, if they want to win the biggest trophies, how are they going to play ball with Clemson? How are they going to beat Clemson? Well, a lot of them are not going to Clemson, but a lot of them want to be as good of a football team as Clemson. So I'm talking about Dwight McLaughlin. I'm talking about Jalen Kimber, Akiola Ogunbiyi, Kendall Milton, Paris Johnson, Keely Ringo. A lot of those guys, they all want to play together at the next level, and they were kind of probing and maybe kicking the tires on what it would be like for all of them if they chose to do that at the University of Georgia.
So I want to dive into one of those names you just mentioned. That was Kendall Milton, the five-star running back. You got a great piece involving Milton and Milton's father, Chris, at dognation.com. And of all the tidbits in there that I thought was most interesting, one of the ones that really stood out to me was the fact that in this recruitment, obviously you'd expect Georgia running backs coach Dell McGee to take center stage in that. Sounds like he is. But that's not the only UGA assistant who's apparently been called in to try to win with Milton. I thought Milton's father, Chris, gave you an interesting quote. I want to show this on the screen. I'll read it from your story at dognation.com. Milton says, it was actually really cool to see the offensive line coach really embrace him, really actually spend time with us. Because when you think about it, the offensive line's only job is to truly protect the quarterback and the running back so they can go. So I get why he wants to get to know the running back and the running back's parents and that sort of thing. That's who he is training those guys to be, the protectors of. So there's absolutely a relationship there. So from Chris Milton, the father of Kendall Milton, we find out that not only is it Dell McGee heavily recruiting Milton this past weekend, but Sam Pittman kind of involved as well. Is this what Milton says, an issue of offensive line and running backs go hand to hand? Or is this an issue that Milton is such an important recruit, you want arguably your two best individual position coach recruiters kind of tag teaming on him? Which of those is most true when it comes to Milton?
Well, let us do a quick test on this, Brandon. What was your immediate reaction when you read that part about Dell McGee and Sam Pittman working on the same guy?
I think that's a buddy cop movie that I'd very much like to see. Those two driving in a Trans Am going around the country solving crimes.
Yeah.
A Sam Pittman, Dell McGee buddy cop sort of crime movie. I'd be all in favor of that. And them partnering up here to win with Kendall Milton, well, I'm in pretty well favor of that too.
So to answer your question, my friend, what I would say with Kendall Milton in Georgia is Kendall Milton is such a big target. They want to put their best quote unquote men on the job. They really want to put their ace recruiters on it. It has a feel a little bit like Game of Thrones or like Avengers, where there's a big problem to tackle here. So you get your best guys, you band them all together, and you see if Georgia can pull in Kendall Milton, a 5-star from California. I think a big thing in that interview that we had, and that report's been up on Dog Nation for a couple of days, guys, is when he mentioned all the schools that he felt his son was talking about and buzzing about and which were really in it. Not a single California school whatsoever.
Yeah.
I think the closest school...
Those two programs of UCLA and USC have just fallen on a hard time recruiting.
I think the closest school in his trajectory or his arc right now, it might be Oklahoma and Ohio State.
Yeah.
Because he's got LSU in there, he's got Georgia, he's got Alabama in there. There's not a whole lot of... And I guess Oregon's in there too. That's probably the only Pac-12 brother we can talk about.
He ain't going to Oregon.
But right there, I think Georgia fans, and I'd love to hear what everybody says on the feed, but they have to feel highly encouraged by the fact that McGee and Pittman are having a buddy movie and they're trying to solve this mystery.
So I was highly encouraged by that news from your story. I was highly encouraged by some of the images that come out of the Milton visit. We'll share more of those today as part of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. But honesty does compel me to admit that when it comes to the Milton visit, reading between the lines with his father Chris to you at DogNation.com, I didn't walk away from that conversation about the other SEC schools that he also visited, LSU and Alabama, necessarily feeling like Georgia had a huge lead over those other schools. Doesn't mean that Georgia doesn't, but Milton didn't give that away in the conversation. Now, I didn't get a negative feeling either, but it seems like Milton chose his words very carefully in that discussion, which is his prerogative, but I will admit that hearing Chris Milton speak to you at DogNation.com or reading those quotes from DogNation.com was probably a little bit less optimistic for me than the overall image of seeing Milton on campus and knowing that he was there for a couple of days. The visual image of the visit may be a little bit more impactful for me in the hopes that Milton comes to Georgia than Milton's father's words to you at DogNation.com.
So I'm glad you brought that up. And, you know, one of the things we try to do with this platform is we try to read between the lines or maybe go between the lines of our recruiting coverage. And I think here's what's key here, Brandon. I need some interactive BA here for
By
a
all
second.
means. We're going to do a little improv here.
So who did Alabama sign last year?
They signed Trey Sanders.
And who else do they got in the backfield as well?
Najee Harris.
And who did LSU sign last year?
John Emery Jr. and Ty Davis.
So one of the things, if you read in that story, the Miltons want to do is they feel he can come in and play, grind, earn his way to playing time, not so much start, but play right away and get in the rotation. Does Alabama offer that chance? Does LSU offer that chance as well as the Georgia Bulldogs?
Pretty interesting.
There's some reading between the lines there. I think the major contenders, if Georgia fans want to start chewing their fingernails about the chances of Kendall Milton, I think it's Oklahoma and I think it's Ohio State. I think both of those fan bases also felt a little Old Town Road, giddy up or whatever, after he came to their town as well. I think the difference here for Georgia is Georgia has an opening. They have the opportunity. They have the business school, which is where he wants to focus on a career in entrepreneurship. But they also have the hog mollies and the behemoths on the offensive line that check a lot of boxes. And that's very important here for Kendall Milton. When I spoke to him this week and we talked about, you know, what's going on for Georgia and maybe what's next for Georgia, he kind of told me that the most impressive thing he liked about Georgia, or his favorite parts, wasn't just the communal aspect with the recruits. It was the fact that Georgia showed him a really good picture of how they support their players after they're gone. And that's with Sony, that's with Nick Chubb. The fact that the Georgia way continues, and once you're a Bulldog, you're always a Bulldog, even after you're done playing. That really impressed Kendall Milton.
We'll find out where Kendall Milton ranks on this week's edition of the top targets for Georgia this 2020 class coming up in just a moment on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. But with the successful recruiting weekend that G-Day seemed to be, both in terms of the commitment that Georgia did get from Akiola Ogunbiyi, more on that in a moment, and the foundation that may be laid for future commitments, all was seemingly well around Dog Nation. But last night, some weird news drops at DogNation.com, and I don't know another word to use to describe this other than weird. A recruiting staffer has been fired. One has been put on 30-day suspension without pay. Daisha King, the name of the staffer who is fired. Lukman Abdullah, the name of the staffer who's been suspended. Jeff, I speculated this morning on DogNation.com, or I should say on Dog Nation Daily, that when we find more information out about this, like a lot of things in life, this is going to end up being more boring than scandalous, I believe. I just think that's the way that stories in life typically work. But when you hear a program like Georgia that's recruited as well as it has, recruiting staffers running afoul of some sort of personnel issue, that's going to get some headlines both within the bubble of Dog Nation and outside that bubble as well. What can you tell us about this?
Well, I would say this. And number one, this is one of those things where it's personnel matter. I don't know how much information a lot of people will get. I do know that a lot of the recruits that come into contact with Daisha, they really like her. She's got a great personality. She's a great face for the program. But I just kind of want to harken back a little bit to what Kirby Smart has said about all kinds of rule breakers or anybody that does anything wrong in the program. Those rules are there for a reason, and Georgia has something, whether it's internally or externally, where those staffers needed to be appropriately disciplined in this way. Now, Lukeman, he's another guy that's been around Georgia as long as Kirby's been there. Very great reputation. A lot of the recruits really appreciate him and the work he does for the program. That's a 1-month suspension for him. It leads me to believe that this is a situation. Everybody wants to sit there and speculate and wonder what's going on. I think the big thing to remember here is Georgia has recruited at such a high level for several years now that sure, a lot of their rivals would love to find something wrong with the way Georgia goes about its business recruiting its players. But now Georgia doesn't need to do anything like that, or they've never had the chance to do anything like that, because they know when you sign all these players, you're going to attract a lot of scrutiny, and that's why Georgia tries to do things above board.
One thing I heard from you, and I want to clarify this a little bit more, it sounds like you think that whatever led to this suspension, whatever led to the firing of King, it is somehow related to recruiting. It's somehow related to the job that they do and not some sort of additional personnel matter that might not have anything to do with the actual job that they do.
Yeah, that's one thing we just don't know about, Brandon. I mean, it could be something simple as, not following human resources policy. It could be something simple, or it could be something more complex. I think if this was an egregious issue by both of these people, then there would have been termination for both parties.
Yeah.
And I think Lukeman.
It's also not been confirmed that these two stories are necessarily related, even though they are announced or they're reported at the same time. It's not even really been confirmed that Abdullah's situation and King's situation are the same situation.
That's correct. And I think, everybody, sometimes what we try to do in this age of information and speed and get it out fast is, just be responsible here. Wait till more of the matter comes out. Report what we can report, and try to add the proper context when we can.
And speaking of proper context, Jeff will do that as a reporter. I'll do that as a fan. I don't mind telling you as a fan, I'm not the least worried about this. Obviously, the headline got my attention. The story is one that I spent some time trying to dig through and see what I could learn about last night. But the more you hear about this, the more you reflect on this. Me speaking personally for me as a fan, I don't believe this is the kind of thing that Dog fans ought to lose sleep over, but we'll wait and find out how it all plays out. What may keep you awake, though, is wondering who Georgia's top targets are for 2020. We'll do that coming up. Before we get to that, let me remind you that this is Jeff Sintel. My name is Brandon Adams. It's Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. Want to have something on your mind as we head towards the next big date on the calendar. Not too early to start thinking about Cinco de Mayo. Well, it's fast approaching. Kroger's got you covered for all your celebrations. For 3 days only, beginning on Friday, May 3rd, you can save on tortillas, sour cream, shrimp, and a whole lot more to create the best tacos and quesadillas. So you can start redeeming next week to start saving there on that. That is going to be a lot of fun. With that said, let's roll on here Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger, and check in on those top targets for the Georgia Bulldogs for the class of 2020. Let's throw them up on the screen right now, starting with name number 1 on the list. And this is one that Georgia fans have been waiting to see. Let's take a look at that right now.
Survey says
Kendall Milton, one of the names that we have just talked about off the top of the program, and you're going to hear from another recruit later on in the show that also believes that Milton's place on this top target list is exactly where it needs to go.
Yeah, so Milton is funny. They don't really have padded up spring practice in Florida, in California, but right now they're actually going through some of their spring drills right now. Of course, Georgia's football coaches are no longer going through spring drills of their own. This is visit season and spring evaluation season. Folks, I think this is crucial. Nothing to worry about with Kendall Milton right there. But the remainder of Georgia's class and how it gets to maybe 20, 21, 22 names will be shaped by what they see out of some of these top targets. Receiver position, defensive line position, other spots like that. It will be shaped by what Georgia sees out of their spring practice evaluations. when they hit the road and go to hit these high schools.
Let's take a look at name number 2 on our list for top targets for the class of 2020. Let's see it. It's Rick Gilbert, the 5-star tight end. He was at G-Day on Saturday, and my guess is, Jeff, he saw a lot more action at the tight end, which is definitely what he wanted.
Yeah, what was the over-under on how many passes Charlie Warner would catch? I think it was 5. I think he caught 4 or 5. Georgia got a lot of run to a lot of its tight ends as well, and that's what Georgia needs to see. Eric Gilbert needs to see Georgia and start viewing Georgia as a tight end-friendly offense.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Name number 3 on our top targets list for the class of 2020 as we roll on here on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. It's the 5-star cornerback Kelee Ringo. He was also on campus on Saturday, tantalized a lot of folks with what he might do on the heels of that. A lot of rumors and innuendo about Ringo. One thing's for sure, he clearly seemed to enjoy himself at G-Day.
Yeah, Ringo's a funny guy. You look at him and everybody thinks he's this big menacing type cornerback, and he just kind of has that presence about him where he's like, you don't want to mess with me over here on my island. He's a really funny guy, and there's a recent report out here from Rivals.com that just gives a little feedback on Kelee Ringo's visit, and he's already established that Georgia and Texas will get official visits. Those should be seen as the 2 front runners for Kelee Ringo. Kelee Ringo's, I think, high school staff spent a week in Austin, Texas with the Texas, and they went through, some of the spring drills and kind of spent a week on campus with the Texas staff. He spent a lot of time in Texas as well on that visit. So Texas and Georgia, a Sugar Bowl rematch. Kelee Ringo might be an outcome here.
Shabazz Ali says, man, Ringo is a beast. A lot of Georgia fans would be thrilled to see him as part of this 2020 class. And when you can set it up this way, where it's unofficial visit to tantalize you, official visit to close the deal, that's the way this stuff's supposed to work.
Yeah, Ringo's had 2 of those unofficial visits. Now he's going to take an official visit. Be interesting to see when exactly he comes out and what his timeline is for things right now. But Kelee Ringo, we moved him up way north on this list about a few weeks back, and with good reason. So,
name number 4 on our top targets list for the class of 2020 is a part of Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. Another offensive lineman. We've talked a lot about those after Akiola Ogunbiyi's commitment, but 4-star offensive tackle Tate Ratledge has got to come up in here as well. Not a ton of in-state prospects on the top targets list, but Ratledge is on here for good reason.
Yeah, you see Ratledge, and I think he's jumped up 3 spots from where he was last week. He was number 7 last week. I think Ringo was number 5 last week. Both of those guys keep moving on up. Both of those guys were at G-Day as well. And to me, Brandon, there's another name on here everybody's going to want to know about, and that's Paris Johnson Jr., who was at Georgia for his official visit. But I think Georgia, first and foremost, for its tackle class in 2020, I think they need to retain, which seems like a solid pledge, in Broderick Jones. And then they also need to lock down Tate Ratledge as well. And then, it sounds really weird to say this, but Paris Johnson might be the Eiffel Tower on top of the 2020 class.
So,
not just a cherry.
Couple quick things here. Do you think it's weird that Broderick Jones, to my understanding, was not at G-Day on Saturday? Is that a weird thing?
No, I've got really good sources around the Broderick Jones decision and how he feels about things. He's just a guy that's just not into visits, Brandon. He's a guy that's not into being there and watching other people play football. It's kind of like giving him an action figure, the latest Marvel Comics or Game of Thrones action figure, and giving it to him on December the 1st and said, sorry, son, you can't open it until Christmas.
James Crump says we need Ratledge. It sounds like you feel that way too, at least for Georgia's standpoint. You have him ranked ahead of where Paris Johnson would be. Why Ratledge over Johnson in your mind?
Well, I really think, and I don't know how much you'll see about this around the industry, but my perception here is that Johnson still really loves Ohio State. He still loves how he's welcomed and received there at Ohio State. And if I'm being totally honest, I'm not sure whether Georgia has the best chance of flipping Paris Johnson or LSU has the best chance of flipping Paris Johnson. Depth chart, things to play right away, and other things like that. Paris Johnson, to me, also doesn't seem to be as ready to play in the SEC, at least as ready to play right out of the gate, as both Tate Ratledge and Broderick Jones surely do.
Now let me move on to the next name on our top targets list for the class of 2020. It's the 5-star linebacker Mikael Sherman from Washington, D.C. Anything you can tell us about Sherman, who also took a big visit to Georgia this past weekend?
Yeah, he took another great official visit to Georgia. It was much the same. Everything stayed sinus rhythm, I guess, in how he feels about the Bulldogs. Going to take an official visit to Ohio State this weekend, and I would wonder if he needs to take all 5. If he took a third official visit, I think his third official might also be to LSU as well. So Mikael Sherman, he's the type of guy, Brandon, that he doesn't want to dilly-dally or worry or wait on this. If he can, finish it before his senior year, but then if his senior year, the curtain goes up on that thing and he's not decided about his school yet, he will very likely wait until after his senior season is over at St. John's College High School.
He and Rakeem Jarrett are seemingly friends, and Jarrett has not really been linked to Georgia in quite some time. Is that the kind of thing that Georgia fans ought to be concerned about?
Well, I don't think Rakeem Jarrett, I think these guys, their decisions are going to be made independently of one another. There's not,
because there's a chance they could be going to like Ohio State on a visit together, right?
But I think this weekend, Rakeem Jarrett is actually going to LSU on his official visit. And you sit there and you start thinking about LSU and its wide receiver tradition there with Jarvis Landry and OBJ. If Ed Orgeron can get a couple of Tigers like Jermaine Burton and Rakeem Jarrett in his wide receiver core, that would be shades of glory for some of the best wide receiver rooms for the Tigers of years past.
Let's rattle through a few more of these names here pretty quick. Number 6 on that list, another tight end, Darnell Washington from Las Vegas. That is one of those guys. It seems like the chatter between he and Georgia would seem to be picking up right now.
Still really good place with Darnell Washington. He's the nation's number 2 athlete. Like I've said before, folks, I wouldn't worry about the collection of big play receivers in this class, especially as long as Georgia, if they were able to add Gilbert and Washington. Of course, that might have far-reaching effects for their 2021 tight end recruiting. But with Washington, I think he's going to come back to Georgia on another unofficial visit when he comes in Atlanta for the 5-Star Challenge. And I do think Georgia will get an official visit from Darnell Washington. And I do think the Bulldogs are really in that thing.
Name number 7 on our Kroger top targets for class of 2020, Marshawn Lloyd, another running back. Georgia hoping, I think, to get 2 elite backs from the class of 2020. Big update on Milton off the top of the program. What's the latest on Lloyd?
So Lloyd's a guy, he's in big time in track season right now for DeMatha Catholic. Really special back out of DeMatha. That's the same school that has produced luminaries like, remember Anthony McFarland Jr. from about 4 or 5 years back. Brian Westbrook went to DeMatha Catholic. Right now he's focusing on his spring track season. He wants to really lower that 100-meter dash time well south of the 11.00 second mark. I don't think he's going to do any more visiting until after his spring track season.
I'm keeping going here on our 2020 targets top list on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. Name number 8 on the list is Paris Johnson of Cincinnati. You talked about him a moment ago. The fact that he was back at Georgia again at least means something. That's what, at least 3 visits over the last month, I guess, for Johnson.
Yeah,
clearly that's going to get the attention of the recruiting community.
Yeah, and Paris is a 5-star in the 2020 class. He's actually the highest rated recruit Georgia's pursuing as far as the ratings go on the 24/7 Sports composite. On our top targets list, I think he's the number 4 overall prospect in the nation. 6'7", about 300. He's a guy, Brandon, if I'm being honest, I don't know how good he is yet. He seems like a very raw prospect. He also seems like a guy that doesn't do a lot of camps, so we can kind of check his oil and see how good he is against guys like Miles Murphy. Some of the other Brian Bresees out there, they're really strong targets in the 2020 class. Again, we spoke a minute ago about Paris Johnson. I think he likes Georgia. I think he also likes LSU a whole lot, and Ohio will still have a very special place for him. He also just visited Ohio State for his spring game as well.
Name number 9 on our top targets list for the class of 2020 is Cedric Von Prawn, another offensive lineman, this time out of the Big Easy of New Orleans. And this is a guy you've been telling us about for quite some time.
Yeah, so Cedric, I think, is the center guard, the center/guard type that Sam Pittman would like to add to this class. I think Ogunbiyi is now, who we'll hear from later, I think Ogunbiyi is now the clear guard that they're going to get in this class. You'll learn a little bit more about Akiola's process and what it looks like for him as a commitment going forward. And then the ideal would be, obviously, Broderick Jones, retain him, the number 2 tackle in the country, secure the commitment from Tate Ratledge, the number 4 offensive tackle in the country. And then if they can get Paris Johnson in the boat as well, then that would even make this guy right here very happy.
No doubt about that. Final name on our top targets for the class of 2020. Let's see that name on the list. It is Zykevius Walker from Sly County, Georgia, a guy that recently released a top 10, and Walker's another one of these in-state guys that Georgia stayed heavily involved with.
Yeah, he's a big guy. I think, a lot of people wonder what he's going to be. I think he's going to be, sometimes I like to give player parallels to guys, and I think he's a guy that could be another Malik Herring for Georgia. He's already about 6'4", 6'5", about 245, 250 pounds. got linked for days. He's out of Schley County, and Georgia has consistently recruited him hard. He continues to have great attention. He continues to get great interest from Georgia, and he continues to have great visits to Athens Town as well. And he was also at G-Day on Saturday.
So that's our top targets for the class of 2020. We'll take a peek ahead to the class of 2021 later today on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. We'll also talk about one of the guys that's no longer on that list because he's no longer available. That's five-star defensive end Bryan Bresee, or defensive lineman, I guess you'd say now. He chose Clemson yesterday. Where'd things go wrong with the Dogs and Bresee? Try to figure that out coming up a little bit later on in the program. But before we get to that, on some good news, Georgia got a commitment on G-Day weekend from four-star offensive lineman Akiola Ogunbiyi. Exactly why did Ogunbiyi see what he needed to see from Georgia and what led up to his decision to, as they like to say, commit to the G? Here is what Ogunbiyi told Jeff Sintel over the weekend.
How do you know you made the right decision?
My mom likes the plays. I like the plays. And Coach Pittman's a great coach. He has the track record, takes guys to the next level. And the guy that he takes to the next level, they usually enter their second contract.
So one of the things I've said at this point in time, it almost seems like Sam Pittman isn't recruiting as much as he's selecting. Ogunbiyi is one that he has definitely picked, and Ogunbiyi says, I see the Pittman track record, and that track record over the next couple of years is about to grow even more when a lot of these Georgia offensive linemen punch their ticket into the NFL. And right now, that same description that so many offensive linemen have given for why they've chosen Georgia, Ogunbiyi sounds just essentially like a re-rack of that statement.
You know, I guess this is the best way I can describe this. Excuse me, Brandon. When you listen to these guys year after year talk about Sam Pittman, it sort of seems like a James Bond movie. You know this is going to happen. They're going to feel a certain way about Coach Pitt, Coach Sam Pittman. They're going to appreciate the way he recruits them differently, the way he connects. And I tell you, Brandon, when you keep looking at that Sam Pittman resume, give it about 2 or 3 more years, and he can sit there and go, okay, Isaiah Wynn, Isaiah Wilson, you're going to have Andrew Thomas, you're going to keep adding names to that list. Solomon Kinley, I think, is a guy. Ben Cleveland will be a guy. You add him to what he's done at North Carolina and what he's done at Arkansas. And Sam Pittman, pretty quickly, give him about another 3 years, he can sit there and tell recruits, there's 20 offensive linemen I've put in the league.
Yeah.
And they've been on their second contracts, and they've been picked high as well coming through his system.
One more audio clip I want you to hear from Akiola Ogunbiyi. No doubt you'll read a lot more from him with Jeff Sintel at DogNation.com. Ogunbiyi went into detail about how he spent his G-Day weekend, not just evaluating the program for himself, but trying to push other guys to join him in the program. And the names that he's apparently recruiting, well, they are the ones that you would also like to see be part of this 2020 class. Here's what Ogunbiyi had to say to Jeff Sintel about that.
So what was this past weekend like for you? What was that like?
It was fun. Doing this official, I was trying to recruit Paris Johnson, Kendall Milton a little, and then Keely Ringo, Tate Ratledge. I feel like we have a good chance with Keely Ringo. I feel like the only person out of that list, the only person that I'm asserting the chance we have is Kendall Milton.
Do you think that's the hardest, the heaviest lifting right there is for Kendall?
Yeah, because he's just so highly recruited and everybody wants him.
Once again, that's four-star offensive lineman Akiola Ogunbiyi, who just committed to Georgia over the weekend, saying, I'm going after Tate Ratledge, I'm going after Paris Johnson, I'm going after Kendall Milton. And he says, I'm not sure about Milton because of just how stiff the competition is. And I think that's an interesting level of honesty to hear from Ogunbiyi on this. But Georgia fans like recruits that want to recruit other recruits. And right now, Ogunbiyi certainly seems to be one of those guys.
Yeah, doubling back on that number we just shared, since 2013, Pittman's already had 8 players selected in the NFL draft, and he's had another 3 signed free agent contracts. So you think about this year, Lamont Galliard will be a guy that I think gets drafted. That goes to 9. Very quickly, you got Kinley potential, Thomas potential, Wilson potential already. You could have 12 guys really quickly within the next 2 years selected off of Sam Pittman offensive line from the University of Georgia, and then also at Arkansas. But one other thing that Akiola told me, and I don't know if it made our tape or not, but the guy he says he wants to play with, the guy he says he thinks is the guy for him, is he wants to play with Paris Johnson.
Yeah, it was a really interesting thing to hear, and I know you'll get a chance to read that at DogNation.com. when these guys who could seemingly view a guy like Johnson as a competitor and yet views him as a teammate he'd like to have, I think that speaks really well of this scenario. It's a lot like what we've heard from previous Georgia classes where they want to be a part of deep position groups, and it sounds like Akiola Ogunbiyi definitely wants to do that.
So quick interactive BA break here.
By all means.
So Georgia's going to face numbers this year. They're not going to get 25. They may not even get 22. They might be stuck around 20, 21 guys in this class. In your opinion, if Georgia does have a guy like Ratledge and a guy like Jones in the class, do you start thinking about the third high-profile offensive tackle? Is that more important to you with the program than another elite wide receiver, than another elite running back? What do you think, given Georgia's many areas of wealth where the cup runneth over?
Really good question.
Do you think it's a luxury item to take a Paris Johnson with already a guy like Jones and already a guy like Ratledge, potentially Ratledge folks in the fold? Do you think Johnson is a take if it means maybe one less five-star at another position?
That's a really good question. You used the word elite. You said, hey, if you could have Paris Johnson or an elite wide receiver, what do you want? I guess it depends on what your definition of the word elite is, because you'd have to be a really, really good player at another position for me to be more valuable than Paris Johnson. Now, you may say, well, if you've got, and you rattle off some possible names of who it could be, Broderick Jones, we assume it will be him. Tate Ratledge, it could be him. Do you really need that third tackle there in Paris Johnson? And my answer to that question is, I might, depending on what I think I can get another position, even in a class where my numbers are limited. I think as it stands right now, this is a scenario where Georgia's recruiting for best player available more so than they are recruiting for position of need at this point in time. Now, it just so happens that offensive tackle is a position of need, but if Johnson's the elite player, I'm going to take him, even if it sort of log jams me a little bit with my offensive tackles, just because I think that he may be a better recruit than players from other positions.
So that's what's great about that conceptual question like that, Brandon, because you sit there and you go, okay, does Georgia need another tackle in this class more than they need another tight end? Maybe they take two this year, Darnell Washington and Reed Gilbert. What about two wide receivers, maybe three wide receivers? You know, that's a clear example. Anybody watching G-Day, no offense to the player right here, but one of those teams, one of the starting three wide receivers in a trip set was a preferred walk-on. Mm-hmm. Georgia didn't even have 6 quality scholarship guys to start the G-Day game. Very telling sign there, especially when you hear about Micaiah Tongue and George Pickens and Dominic Blaylock. One more thing to remember about that question, though. 2021 tackles, Brandon. If Georgia takes 3 giants of the 2020 class, and if Johnson joins the fold, then that would be the number 1, the number 2, and the number 4 tackles. Georgia also has the option where they're in very good shape with both Marius Mims right now, a 5-star tackle, the number 1 player in Georgia in 21, and then Micah Morris, another number 4 tackle in the country in 2021. This might be a reverse Georgia thing where the more tackles they take in 2020, the harder it is to get the elite guys in state in 2021.
Before we talk about Bryan Bresee, let me squeeze in one comment from our Facebook comment section from James Crump, who mentions an offensive lineman. We've just talked about a lot of them. An offensive lineman we haven't mentioned is Justin Rogers. At this point in time, it does not seem that Rogers is in Georgia's plans, nor is Georgia in Rogers' plans.
Yeah, I don't think Justin has been on our top targets list.
That's changed. That's really changed dramatically.
Changed a lot. Here's what changed it. Number 1, it was because he started thinking he was a different position in college football,
right?
Which is very rare. Not saying he's not the athlete to do it, but you saw a little bit of this when he played inside linebacker last year for his high school team, Dwan Mathis's high school team, mind you. But then he's like, I don't know if I want to be a guard in college. I either want to be a tackle, an offensive tackle, or a defensive tackle in college. And folks, there's just not a lot of film out there with Justin Rogers, and he's looking around in a lot of spaces. And with Georgia, they have to look at it. I feel they'll look at it and go, Rogers, not sure what he would be at these other positions. Do we like him better than our other guys? Let's just try and recruit stable, sure things right now.
We will go inside the look at how recruits enjoyed themselves on G-Day from the pages of social media coming up in just a moment. But for now, though, on Before the Hedges are presented by Kroger, let's do a little bit of an autopsy on where things went wrong with 5-star defensive lineman Bryan Bresee, who chose Clemson yesterday over Georgia. And frankly, there was so little fanfare by the time the announcement was made. That really, for me, is the worst part of this. It's not a surprise that Bresee chose Clemson, but the fact that it didn't even really make a ripple around Dog Nation just gives you an idea of just how long with Bresee this thing had been over. And yet it's still worth pointing out, boy, it is hard to understand how things went this south this quickly, because I'm going to go back to something Bresee told you about Georgia not all that long ago, seemingly that when he looked at the relationship he has with UGA, it was seemingly bolstered by all the friends that he has on the Georgia roster. In fact, let's go back and hear Bresee before he committed to Clemson.
What's the mindset with that program right now? How do you feel about them?
I still feel the same way, especially with Nolan and Trayvon, and they're getting a lot of really good recruits. And I love Coach Scott and Coach Smart.
Yeah, we saw this with our own eyes going back to the the All-American season, the high school All-Star season back in the winter. Bresee does have a great relationship with Trayvon Walker, does have a great relationship with Nolan Smith, but ultimately, that's not going to win the day as much in recruiting. But, for a Georgia program that needs dynamic defensive linemen to not even make the podium for a guy like Bresee on the day that he chooses Clemson, that's kind of a disappointment.
Hold on, they were on the podium.
I mean, theoretically speaking.
Well, yeah, you probably didn't see the announcement.
I didn't.
But I had to go back.
I had a lot better things to do with my day yesterday than watch this announcement on streaming video.
Well, me being the intrepid reporter that I am, I knew we were going to talk about Bryan on the show today. And I didn't watch the announcement yesterday either, because I think I knew what was going to happen. But what he did is he had all the members of his family wearing a different kind of shirt for his 6 finalists. One was in Ohio State, one was in Penn State, one was in Georgia, one was in Alabama, and then one was in Clemson. And he made his choice. He unzipped his jacket. Yeah. It's Clemson. And then everybody else that had a other top 6 member type sweatshirt or T-shirt on, they took off that shirt, and then they all had Clemson shirts on underneath. It's very interesting. Bailey Bresee, the one that said that Georgia was her favorite, and that was going to wear the Georgia wristband until he chose elsewhere, she was the one wearing the Georgia sweatshirt. One thing to think about, Brandon, last week I think you used the word toe tag, and this week you're using autopsy. Letting his cards show here just a little bit. Big picture thing I think here with Bresee is Georgia is having a smashing time recruiting linebackers right now. That's because they run the 3-4 scheme, and that features the linebackers in their defense. Clemson, on the other hand, runs the 4-3 scheme, which features the defensive linemen in their defense. And folks, Clemson might have 3 or 4 first-round picks off their defensive line in this draft, this NFL draft tomorrow on Thursday. This is an example where scheme fit seems a little better for Bryan Bresee to do what he wants to do as a defensive lineman in Clemson. And folks, you just got to chalk it up, because Clemson has amazing momentum. They've beaten Alabama. Georgia had 2 cracks at it. Clemson has beaten Alabama 2 out of the last 3 times they've faced them. Recruits notice this when it's going against the biggest guns in college football are coming after their decisions. And again, reputation, position fit, and again, Georgia hasn't won the big games that Clemson has. They have a strong roster coming back. They have the tradition and the lineage and the pipeline at his position. It's a very smart decision what Bryan Bresee made when you know what he's looking for.
I'm not mad at Bresee for making the choice that he made. He's obviously got to do what he feels is best for him. I guess if anything, my disappointment stems from, you're going to be recruiting against 4-3 teams all the time. I think you have to have a creative pitch of, hey, you may think that you're a better fit over here because of the glitz and glamour associated with being a pass-rushing defensive end in a 4-3 scheme. Let me explain why you're going to make more money at the NFL by doing what we want you to do. And I feel like that's a creative pitch you've got to have at the ready. And you can't just take a knee and take the L every time Clemson wants a defensive lineman that you want. At some point in time, if Georgia's ever going to get over the hump and win these games, they have to win these kinds of recruiting battles. So I'm not mad at Bresee, but this for Georgia has to improve.
Well, here's what I would say right there, Brendan, and that's an intelligent conversation point right there you bring up. And I'm just going to ask everybody out there. Let's say you're a defensive line prospect. Should Georgia ever have a better pitch than Clemson right now when that defensive line coach can say, I got X, Y, and Z in the NFL. They're supposed to be first-round draft picks. We're winning. We're beating Alabama. We're winning national championships. We got more on the way. I don't know how Georgia has the track record among Titans to counter that pitch right now. And maybe it's a simple thing where Georgia needs to start developing defensive linemen in its arsenal and sending them to the league.
It's very true.
You're talking about the #1 player in the country now. It's a different thing when you're trying to pull that kid out of Maryland to your program on promise when Clemson has more proof, especially with the bigger trophies in their trophy case as of late.
Very true.
Here's what needs to happen. Trayvon Walker needs to be a monster at Georgia. Jordan Davis needs to continue to be a monster at Georgia. Those guys need to go and hear their name called in the first round by Roger Goodell. And then that's how Georgia can start defusing that 4-3 D-line argument.
All right, we'll wish Bresee well at Clemson and move on to a happier topic here on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. By the way, before we do that, let me also remind you, as I said before, you got Cinco de Mayo savings starting for 3 days on Friday, May 3rd. So get ready for that. You can begin redeeming next week, but start your saving for that big Cinco de Mayo party. That is going to be a lot of fun. Good to have that as a part of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. Also fun to kind of check in on some of the top tweets from UGA recruiting targets of the last few days. A lot of it's centered around having good times at G-Day this past weekend. In fact, why don't we take a look at the first one of those? We'll kind of talk our way through what we see here. Our top tweets here Before the Hedges presented by Kroger, and this is one that needs no explanation for itself. You love the phrase, just a matter of time. Kendall Milton in the background, Heisman Trophy in the foreground. As the kids like to say, this one gets me in the fields. This one gets me in the fields.
So, Brandon, let's take it through your thought inside the mind of a Dog Nation Daily podcaster. The first thing that comes to your mind there, Brandon, is it he thinks he's going to win a Heisman, or does he think he's going to be winning a Heisman at Georgia in that number out of that locker room?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I don't take this as like an ego thing at all. You know, Trey Sanders saying he's winning a Heisman in his freshman season, that would seem to be a little bit of a turnoff for some people. This is not a turnoff for me. This is a guy saying, hey, Georgia's a program with a heritage of Heisman Trophy winning running backs. Greatest running back of all time went there. If you are a running back that has aspirations on being great, and if you're Kendall Milton, why would you not? To me, all that makes all the sense in the world.
You want to talk about, this is the Clemson thing that people were talking about in our last segment. Clemson has momentum. Well, let's look at this. Kendall Milton plays in California. Who is the NFL's alpha back right now who also plays pro football in that state?
Yeah, Todd Gurley.
Todd Gurley.
Yeah.
So he's at G-Day. And guess who he gets to just mosey on up to off the Georgia sideline? Sony Michel and Nick Chubb. These are two pros with gajillions of millions of dollars. And what are they doing on a free Saturday of the spring? They're coming back home to watch Georgia and to look at the next edition of the Georgia program. That makes a huge impact, folks.
In fact, I think somebody sent that tweet to me, and I think we have that. I don't mean to jump out of order here, but I think we have that one from Milton, allegedly on the sideline with Chubb and Michelle. Can we show that of those guys there? We don't have that one. Okay. Well, let's see the next one we do have then.
I think it will come in the show later.
All right. So here is the same Chris Milton talking to Carson Beck. You and I talked about this on Dog Nation Daily a little earlier this week. I love it when the patriarchs of the families get together, when the fathers want to get together, and those guys are looking to hook up. And Chris Milton going through Carson Beck to get that done. I really like that.
I can confirm that those fathers have gotten in touch with one another.
Well, there you go. That's all I need to hear right there. I like the idea of the quarterback's dad and the running back's dad saying, you know, I sort of picture smoke-filled room, you know, kind of like a backroom, boardroom type deal where they kind of lay it all together and lay all the plans together. I like that.
I can confirm. Those dudes know each other's number.
All right, let's take a look at the next tweet of the week here on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. Now we get the picture of Kendall Milton with what appears to be Nick Chubb, Sony Michel. Someone sent that to me on Twitter, and that is an example of what we talked about before, getting that big-time recruitment for some pretty impressive running back.
Yeah, let's go back to our visual aid here because that's what they're for. Let's flash that back up right in there now. Now, B.A., who's the tallest, biggest person in that photo?
I would look to be Mr. Chris Milton, was it look to be.
Well, biggest maybe, but the tallest one is Kendall Milton.
Yeah, it
his
really
son.
is, yeah.
But then the second biggest is Chris Milton.
Yeah.
And again, it's so funny, some of the dog fans out there, they're talking to me and they're like, man, I don't think the Georgia coaches look at stars whatsoever. They just look at their dad. And if that guy is a hoss, and if that guy's a guy you want going down a dark alley with you, his son's got to be a terrific football player, a great running back, a potential future dog. Forget all those stars.
Yeah, so I love the idea of being able to lean on your RBU heritage to work with a recruit like that. I don't know if it worked on Milton. I don't know if it's going to be one of the deciding factors in recruitment, but as I say from time to time, it cannot hurt, and I don't think it hurt with Milton on Saturday. Let's see the next tweet that we have here. How about this one? The guy that just committed to the University of Georgia. Watch Akiola Ogunbiyi here. Absolutely put someone into the earth. Take a look at this as it's coming up here. Pretty impressive stuff there from Ogunbiyi.
Yeah, that's a past the frame block right there. One thing, I even retweeted this on my timeline on Twitter, but the things you got to remember, Akiola did not start playing football until the fall of 2016. This is only his third spring practice as a football player, and Georgia views him as a guard with very good feet, the guard for the 2020 class. And as he said in our interview earlier today before the Hedges, he's done. No more visits, except multiple visits to Georgia.
Yeah. Now, how much can you judge from a player like this who's, let's face it, probably not on the field with a lot of other SEC type players? He's much bigger. How much can you take away from that film?
Well, that's a running offense. One of the things I really like about Akiola's story is that they don't throw the ball at all. His high school team he told me 3 passes last year for the whole season, not just a game, the entire season. And you look at him, he's had 2,000-yard rushers at his high school. They usually follow off his right hip pad to a lot of big gains and everything else like that. And Ogunbiyi is a guy, very interesting how he always had Georgia up very high in his recruitment, never having even visited the school until earlier this month. And now it's already a done deal, and he's done with his visits whatsoever. Folks, that is the power of Sam Pittman.
All right, we have another tweet to see here. Our top tweets from the week, looking back on the week that was for UGA recruiting, and a bunch of visitors. I kind of teased this a little earlier. Keely Ringo, fresh off his visit to Georgia, asking that question. Should I commit to the G? Well, a lot of Georgia fans have given the chance to answer that. They will answer in the affirmative.
They would, and it's funny because that was, again, you got to follow these visits. His second unofficial. He's got another official plan coming out of Arizona where there's not a dominant program, a home anchor program to maybe keep him in state. He's another guy that I think if Texas doesn't get him, it's got to be Georgia or Texas right now as the front runners for Keely Ringo.
All right, any more tweets to see here? We got some more. Here we go.
How
about Jalen Kimber? The Kimber family, very active on social media this week, and this is another one of those things you like to see. Look at all the smiles here from a lot of those guys, that all the right folks in this picture together. And I loved Jalen Kimber, fresh off his UGA commitment, kind of showing off a lot of these guys here.
Yeah, so Kimber is done. That's clearly done. If we go back to our previous tweet, I want to make sure. Let me do some speed round BA, Brandon, from left to right. Can you identify all these guys for our audience?
Probably not. I won't let you do that for me.
Left in the big Georgia Power G and the beanie, that's Dwight McLaughlin. Then you've got Jalen Kimber coming up next to his right. Paris Johnson all decked up in G's as well. That's the third man. Then it's Akiola Ogunbiyi, the guard, their most recent commit to Georgia. Then you've got Kendall Milton. Then you've got Keely Ringo in the hoodie. And then that's Carson Beck. And I don't think his horn is nearby, but there's him trying to be a Pied Piper for the class of 2020.
Yeah, you love to see that. And Kimber's family also showing off another one of these photos where it's just another example of these guys kind of hanging out, having a good time together. That relationship that can be formed on something like this, that can certainly fill in and go a long way towards helping determine these recruiting decisions.
Yeah, and here's an update. Kimber, coming off his official visit, he is absolutely done, Brandon. His family is already getting his transcripts in order, his qualifications in order. They're checking in with Georgia, sending paperwork in back and forth. Whatever deadlines there are for the class of 2020 for a scholarship Bulldog, they don't care about those stinking deadlines. They want to have it in. And during this spring evaluation period, when coaches come to see Jalen Kimber, he's already told his head coach, thanks but no thanks. I appreciate your interest, but I'm happy with Georgia. I'm committed to Georgia, and I'm going to Georgia.
I think we have one more to show here. Let's take a look at this. This one coming from a really good-looking defensive end prospect, Jacoby Cowan, wanting to find out how those visits went. And that's always kind of the fun part of this, too, the aftermath conversation of what was it really like on Georgia and how much red carpet did they roll out for you.
So, I can never really get Brandon.
And juiced up K9 is Mikael Sherman, right?
Correct.
Yeah, because I said that was my nickname when I was in high school as well.
It was, obviously. But with that, Brandon, I knew that would kind of wet your whistle a little bit because, number one, you've not only got recruits talking to other recruits and having some Twitter chatter, but you also have 5-star outside linebacker, 5-star running back, and then a very highly rated top 100 defensive lineman is very interested in what went down at Georgia, what was the scoop out of the weekend. So right there, Brandon, you're checking a lot of boxes in your 2020 class by including Mr. Jacoby Cowan. Now, Cowan, if we had 11 or 12 on our top targets list, he would probably be 11. Trey Scott has been recruiting and has a strong, viable, genuine relationship with Jacoby Cowan since the 8th grade. that's one to really think about there.
So we'll watch that and see how all of that plays out. All right, still to come here on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger today. We'll give you all a chance to talk with us. We'll do hurry up, 5 minutes worth of questions and comments. We'll even give away a $50 Kroger. How about them groceries? A gift card. We'll do that coming up a bit later on. We'll also do our weekly six-pack where we check in on Jeff Sintel and his trivia questions designed to stump us. He'll get a chance to do that. But before that, we do top 2020 targets on the show each and every week. It's also probably a start time, especially if we head towards those spring and summer months, which is a critical time for the 2021 class, the following recruiting cycle. So why don't we take a couple minutes here and also just kind of get a little bit familiar with some of those names to know for the class of 2021 as well. In fact, why don't we take a look at that right now? Number one on the list, a name that you mentioned before, Amarius Mims from Cochran, a big-time prospect from the state of Georgia. And if you're thinking about those offensive tackle names, another name to consider moving ahead of that next cycle.
Yeah, so Amarius, he played mostly tight end for Bleckley County last year. He was that athletic. 6'7", a legit 6'7", already 302 pounds. Georgia has identified Amarius as the top target in the country, according to some of their boards and some of their rankings for 2021. This is what we were talking about earlier with Paris Johnson. Is he a luxury? Is he a need? Do you want to complicate things with 2021 recruits? Well, Amarius Mims is the number one prospect in Georgia for 2021. I think there's some strong sentiment there for him with Alabama as well, should Alabama ever offer him. Alabama hasn't offered yet, but Amarius was at Georgia on Saturday, enjoyed another visit. Georgia is prioritizing him as well. And one thing I'll say as we start off with this 2021 top targets list, it's going to be an abbreviated one. It's not going to be 12 names or 10 names. But this, to me, the tea leaves and the waters feel right for really starting to talk about some 2021 Georgia commitments. That's because Georgia, as of now, does not have a 2021 commitment on the board as a public commitment yet.
All right, name number two on this list, a little bit of a peek ahead to 2021. Let's take a look at that. The number two name, Micah Morris, another offensive lineman. Heavy on offensive lineman on today's show. This one a very impressive prospect out of Camden County.
Yeah, I think this will take care of Pittman always working ahead, but also it takes care of keeping the very elite talent that stands out nationally in the home state, keeping them home and making them homegrown Bulldogs as well. And Micah Morris, so impressed with him because I don't even think he really knows how to play offensive tackle yet, and yet he was in the top 5 at the Atlanta opening regional earlier this spring. I think he was the third best lineman there behind Paul Teo going to Clemson and also Tate Ratledge going to Georgia. Georgia or Tennessee. Tate Ratledge has a choice between Georgia or Tennessee, and I think Tate Ratledge was the top lineman at the Atlanta opening. He was named the MVP. Teo was next, and I think Micah Morris out of Camden was third.
Name number 3 on this list, peeking ahead to the 2021 targets. How about Peyton Page from Greensboro, North Carolina?
Yeah, I bet you haven't heard a whole lot about him, Brandon, but
Not
he's
yet.
the number 1 rated defensive tackle in the country for the 2021 class. He's visited Georgia already this spring. Of course, those Clemson Tigers are after him. Of course, those LSU Tigers are after him. Of course, everyone and their brother is after Peyton Page. But he's already visited Georgia. There's some of that North Carolina roots there with Trey Scott as well in the Greensboro area. And last time I checked, I don't think anyone on this program, especially this guy, will complain about Georgia and 5-star defensive tackles.
You like to see that. How about the rest of the 2021 list? Name number 4 on that list. This is a guy, when you think about starting to stock up on those quarterbacks, especially in the post Jake Fromm era, Brock Vandegrift may be one of those guys.
Yeah, so everybody wants him. He's a really good target. I think Oklahoma really likes him a lot. There's some mutual interest there as well because Vandegrift is already at the point where he's going, if he's taking a visit and taking time out, then that means that they're a serious contender. He was at G-Day. He's told me recently where Georgia didn't quite have the volume and turned up on the intensity of the recruiting pitch and the communication compared to other schools. He said Georgia has now caught things up, and now he hears from the staff often.
Is there another name on our 2021 list to take a look at here? The final name, number 5, another one of those guys, a 4-star athlete, David Daniel of Woodstock. That's a guy that's taken a lot of Georgia visits as of late. You've also got some other names to think about, a 4-star running back with Cody Brown, a 4-star wide receiver in Jaden Thomas, who you've written about at DogNation.com. Then another wide receiver who seems to be gathering some steam as of late, and that's Jaquez Smith.
Yeah, he's out of Hapeville Charter. He has a lot of ties to the Georgia program. We'll have a story about him coming up soon on the website. There's just so many 2020 visits and updates to get to, but Both of those guys, Thomas and Smith, are 4-star in-state products from the state of Georgia. Really good-looking receivers, can already do a lot of things at the wide receiver position.
All right, we'll do our 5-minute hurry up in just a moment, give you a chance to get questions and comments in. But now, Jeff, the floor is yours for the weekly six-pack as we kind of take a break from the twists and turns of the recruiting trail to get a little trivia in.
So we're going to have fun with this one, Brandon. Just simple, pure, fun. And some would say that this particular specific six-pack segment would be before the Hedges going to the movies.
All right, going to the movies. Wow.
Of course, there's a very big juggernaut blockbuster of a film set to open Thursday night. That would be The Avengers. So our premise this year, because Georgia does have something to avenge with the 2019 season,
I like it,
is we wanted to cast the Georgia Bulldogs as your favorite Avengers characters.
All right.
So let's look at number one. And some of these guys, they're going to feel like a bingo game and you get a free space. But nonetheless, we want people to get some right today on our six-pack segment. Number one, which Georgia Bulldog would Dog Nation cast as Captain America? Kirby Smart, Dan Lanning, Jake Fromm, or Charlie Warner? So you got Lanning, he just added the beard. He's got the beard. So Captain America had a beard in the last episode of Infinity War. So which one of those four do you think would be ideal?
I probably know less about like comic book lexicon than you might think, but isn't Captain America supposed to be the leader of the Avengers?
Leader?
So if that be the case, then I think you've got to go with Kirby Smart as Captain America at that point in time.
Let's see.
If Captain America is the leader of the Avengers, that isn't Kirby the Captain America of the dogs version of the Avengers?
Well, this is going to get technical here, but I do have a 10-year-old son that we've seen probably 20 of the 22 Marvel movies over the last 10 years. And the leader of the Avengers was probably Nick Fury, played by Samuel L. Jackson. He's kind of like the organizer, the founder of the feast. He recruited all the Avengers.
Okay.
And then maybe there's a different guy that, Captain America is kind of the on-field battle leader of the Avengers, or maybe the guy everybody looks to in a heated situation.
Chris Branham says, wow, Superman's the leader of the Avengers. Don't be dumb. Chris, you're going to upset a lot of the comic book people by saying that. All right, so what's the answer? I have no idea.
You got to give me a guess, Brandon.
Then if it's not going to be Kirby Smart, then I'll say Jake Fromm.
There you go. Well, do we give him a buzzer or a bell for that? Because he initially said Kirby Smart, and then we had to educate. The correct answer there is Jake Fromm. Let me know, people who got that right. Let me know who's
wait, why is Jake Fromm Captain America? I mean,
the on-field leader of the Avengers, the battlefield leader of the Avengers would be Jake. And Jake Fromm, to me, America, all-American kid, goes fishing, goes hunting, gets tackles in his legs. He's just kind of the poster boy for the Georgia football program.
Connor Riley wants to talk. I'm not going to be able to hear him because my earpiece fell out, but go ahead.
It's third grade BA. Jake Fromm is pretty clearly Captain America. Like,
he's an all-American type guy or whatever, but I don't have a problem with it necessarily. So there you go. Easy Brown, James Crump, they got that right.
Let me know how you guys are doing. Brandon, I think we'll give you half credit on that. James Crump's 1 for 1. Our second question, again, these are all Bulldogs as Avengers.
All right.
Which Georgia Bulldog would Dog Nation cast as Iron Man?
All right, well, let's see.
You need to know what Iron Man is? Iron Man is a guy.
Yeah, I know who it is.
Okay.
It's Tony Stark. He wears the suit. So, I don't really know. I don't have any idea.
So Iron Man is a guy that is very smart. His willpower and his brain is probably his chief asset or tool to the Avengers. He's also a billionaire, philanthropist, playboy, genius, inventor. He's basically a guy that has all the tools.
So I was looking for somebody wearing like extra padding and extra stuff, extra gear. I don't really necessarily see one of those guys doing that. I don't really know. I'll go Nolan Smith, I guess.
Ooh, interesting choice. Everybody else, Brandon goes Nolan Smith. Do we have everybody in? Charles Kaiser gives us a D. Heather Chastain-Bain
agrees with me.
Let's look at those options again, and we're going to give Brandon Adams a buzzer or a bell for his answer.
All right. I got it right.
So Nolan is a guy that I think checks every box. He's big, he's strong, he's powerful, he's fast. He's got an iron will. If you see him, I think his mind is probably one of his sharpest tools.
All right.
How he won't buckle under anything.
There you go.
So Iron Man, he's not a billionaire yet, a billionaire yet. That'll
But
come
one of
in
these
3
days,
years.
one of the you keep rushing that passer. One of those days, that may come to be.
Moving on to number 3, and Brandon, by the way, you're a solid 1 for 2.
There you go.
Which Georgia Bulldog would Dog Nation cast as Thor?
So I'm thinking this is a long hair one.
The Nordic god of thunder.
Yeah, I feel like from a hair standpoint, you got to go McBride on this, right? I mean, Ben Cleveland is a lot of things. Thor-like is not necessarily one of them. I'd feel the same way about Werner and Mays as well. They're all kind of the same kind of category. They may be more like Incredible Hulk types who are, I realize he's probably not an Avenger, but Thor does have like the long hair. McBride does. This one to me feels like kind of an easy one. I feel like McBride is the Thor of Georgia.
So in the latest movie, the one that's not out on Friday, but in the Infinity War segment, Thor's cut his hair.
Is that right?
It's all gone. So now he's closely cropped.
Yeah. Even still.
Let's look at the choices again. We've given time for Facebook and Dog Nation YouTube to weigh in. And Dog Nation, our answer, we chose C, Cade Mays.
Wait, how we getting there?
Cade Mays is a huge, powerful dude with long hair. He tends to throw.
Wait, Cade Mays doesn't have long hair?
Cade Mays has he has facial hair.
Right.
He's a guy that
Does
wears.
Thor have facial hair?
He has a guy that wears a helmet on the field, just
Yeah.
like all these guys do, of course. But Thor's
Adrian Carver says it should be McBride, and I agree. Like, that's the one that has the easiest tie-in. Like, I don't know if Thor's short hair now, but for a long time, that's the reason why they call it, was it Noah Syndergaard? That's the reason why they call him Thor, because he's got long hair.
Here's why.
But you got to think about Thor's a guy that can go toe-to-toe with Thanos, toe-to-toe with the Hulk, everybody else like that. I just went with beefy Cade Mays, especially, folks, if you saw that clip of him from G-Day where he puts his helmet on another Bulldog and paint chips start flying. Cade Mays, to me, the Nordic god of thunder, carries a big stick.
I'm going to go with Nate McBride on this one. I'm going to play this one under. I'm going to play this one under protest.
Under protest. Well, you still got buzz for that, Brandon.
All right.
Number 4. This might be, I think, the hardest one here, Brandon.
All right.
This might be the hardest one here.
Oh,
Which
great.
Georgia Bulldog would Dog Nation cast as the Incredible Hulk?
So the Incredible Hulk is someone who is mild-mannered by day, but you wouldn't like him when he was angry. At least that's what the Hulk that I grew up with. So I would be looking for someone kind of like that, who is, kind of a probably a nice guy off the field and maybe a little bit of a monster on the field. Can I see those choices one more time? So given that criteria, to me, this feels like the kind of thing that an Isaiah Wilson could be. I've had a chance to speak to Wilson before. Super thoughtful, incredibly nice guy. Yet he's mauling people on the field. Wilson's a guy that I think could be that. Davis's personality I don't know as much about, so I can't really speak to that. I think that Ben Cleveland probably fits in that mold a lot. I don't know Trey Hill off the field quite as well. Jamari Salyer is an answer for that. So I'm tempted to go Wilson and Salyer because of the way their two personalities can seemingly be so different on and off the field, and I'll probably settle on Isaiah Wilson.
This is how he breaks it down. See Brandon doing a little strategery.
That's where I come in on this.
Getting it on the board. That's
where I come in on this.
Going Columbo trying to break it all down.
If you talk to Wilson off the field, he comes across as a very studious young man. But on the field, he's mauling people.
So
which is what you wanted to do.
having spoken to all those gentlemen right there, let's go back up to the board right there. And your criteria about mild-mannered, great guy, great personality, engaging, refreshing, it really applies to all these gentlemen.
Okay.
And thus, your answer of Isaiah Wilson will apply because
All right.
with this
There you
one,
go.
question 4, we are accepting any answer right here as the Incredible Hulk. Because, and there's a good reason for this, folks. It's
There
because
better be.
Georgia has so many players on its roster now that could qualify as the Incredible Hulk that we're accepting all answers for this one this week.
Can I just say this? For now and forever, I don't care how much money the Avengers makes, the Incredible Hulk is Lou Ferrigno. That's the Incredible Hulk.
I don't know about that.
That's the Incredible Hulk.
What about the actor who played the Incredible Hulk? Before you
When I was a kid, Lou Ferrigno did play the Incredible Hulk.
No, but the David Banner type.
And he didn't need some CGI thing to be it.
he needed the purple pants.
He was just himself.
I don't know. That new Hulk they got right now with some CGI looks pretty good.
All right, well there you go.
Moving on, number 5.
All right.
Which Georgia Bulldog would Dog Nation cast as the Black Panther?
So I haven't seen either of these movies. I haven't seen Black Panther nor have I seen Avengers.
You've got Adam Anderson,
All right.
Great track athlete, great
Sure.
high jumper, fast. His game is predicated on speed. N'Kobe Dean, obviously N'Kobe has impressed everyone so far during spring practice. J.R. Reed, another guy that has quick reflexes.
Sure.
Has a really sharp intellect on and off the field.
Sure. Is that the Black Panthers deal? Is he supposed to be super smart or something?
Oh yeah, he's the ruler of Wakanda. He's the king of Wakanda.
Okay.
Azeez Ojulari, another guy that fits a lot of those profiles in terms of intelligence, tenacity, strength, and smarts. And then a guy like Eric Stokes, who every time we see him play, he just gets a little bit better. He's a blossoming prospect, not just a prospect for Georgia, but I don't know if this might be his last year at Georgia.
So I am very confident in my answer. Now, it may not be the answer you've selected, but I feel very good about my answer. If Black Panther, you say, is the ruler of Wakanda, the ruler of the Georgia defense right now, a guy who's proven it on the field, all due respect to N'Kobe Dean, Azeez Ojulari, they may be on their way to doing that, Adam Anderson as well. Eric Stokes kind of has. But the guy that's been the absolute boss of that defense now for a little while and is going to be that guy in 2019, I believe, is J.R. Reed. So the line to be the Black Panther, I think, forms behind J.R. Reed. I am very confident in my answer. The line forms behind J.R.
Okay, so here's our answer. Let's go to the board. Was Brandon get a buzzer or a bell?
That's absolutely wrong. That's absolutely incorrect.
Don't let reporting or information get in the way of what you put together was a nice little
That's
rumored
absolutely incorrect.
narrative. Azeez Ojulari.
Love Azeez, but you got to earn Black Panther status.
Do you know why he is our answer as Black Panther?
I don't know that.
That's because all the members of the team refer to him as he's made of vibranium and he's from Wakanda.
Well,
because Azeez impresses them at every turn, every practice rep, every weight room lift. They think he is a superhero from Wakanda and he is made of vibranium. An excellent take, Brandon, but there is some factoid connected to that.
I feel like my answer was still right. Devin Glenn, though, says he knew it was going to be Azeez. And I got no problem with Azeez Ojulari eventually being that. Sugar Bowl gave you a glimpse as to why that might be, and he certainly got some love on G-Day as well. But for me, you got to earn that status. J.R. Reed has earned a status at UGA.
Okay, let's listen to our neutral.
By the way, I guess I didn't know, is the Black Panther one of the Avengers?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
So let's let our neutral, objective arbiter behind the glass, Connor, weigh in on here.
I would just like to point out that in the last 5 minutes, BA has wondered if the Black Panther and the Incredible Hulk are Avengers. Incredibly tough look for you, BA.
Listen, I got young kids, but my kids, for whatever reason, are not into the superheroes. We do the Star Wars stuff, the Disney stuff. I haven't seen these superhero movies. I like Batman.
The Avengers movies are probably for 9, 10, and up.
Yeah.
You got your kids aren't quite there yet. And we got one more, Brandon, I think we got at least one more. At least one more.
At least one more.
It only seems like we've been doing this all afternoon.
Oh, come on, Brandon. When he's not
kidding.
winning them.
I'm kidding.
Potential trick question.
Ant-Man is not a Avenger. I know that for a fact. I know for a fact Ant-Man's not an Avenger.
Judges.
Ant-Man is absolutely an Avenger.
Ant-Man's an Avenger?
Yeah, he's like prominently featured in the new trailer.
He is one of the key Avengers in the next movie.
The one that's played by the comedic actor?
Did you not see the last Avengers during Captain America Civil War when he allowed Captain America to escape to Wakanda? Played a big role. Ant-Man, let me give you a little Wikipedia here.
At this point in time, the Avengers is more watered down by expansion than the ACC.
So Ant-Man is a guy that is very small, but in certain situations can supersize himself and play giant on a big stage. He has those powers where he can be very, very small, like smaller than the number of 5 stars in Florida's recruiting class, or he can go very, very big, which is like a Georgia offensive tackle under Sam Pittman.
All right, let's see this question. All right, which Georgia Bulldog would Dog Nation cast as Ant-Man for the reasons you just said?
A, Rodrigo Blankenship.
Yeah.
B, Anthony Edwards.
The actual Ant-Man.
C, Demetrius Robertson, or D, Jake Camarda.
All right, I am going to go with a guy who's shown a propensity to show up big in big moments. I'm going to go with Hot Rod Rodrigo Blankenship.
Hot Rod Rodrigo Blankenship.
Technically, he's probably more of a Clark Kent with the glasses and takes him off to become Superman. I'm going to go with Rodrigo.
James Crump says this one's too easy. He's putting A, Rodrigo as well.
Yeah.
DeMayer has a B. Roe Hawkins, is laughing. Adrian Carver says Anthony Edwards is Ant-Man. He can do anything. That's actually his nickname.
Right.
Mrs. Carver, that's why we said this was probably potentially a trick question. And that's because, let's look at the board. The answer is
Rodrigo. There you go.
Rodrigo is Ant-Man.
There you go.
I get basketball, but this is not a basketball program. Hedges is all about football. That's
Sure.
our first disclaimer. That's why I put potential trick question in there. And look at Rodrigo, smallest, tiniest Bulldog on this gargantuan Georgia Bulldog team, and yet he comes up big in the most opportune moments.
There you
He
go.
plays bigger than himself. That's why, to me, while we're paralleling Avengers and Bulldogs, that's why Hot Rod is my Ant-Man.
I like that. It's good stuff. I'll allow that.
So we went through 6.
I think I ended up doing pretty well.
But sometimes, especially since you know who half the Avengers are, but sometimes, Brandon, 1 6-pack is just not enough.
Oh my gosh.
You need to go one more. Just one more.
Lucky 7th. The lucky 7th on Kroger's Before the Hedges.
So we've got one more for you. And so if we've looked at all of these Avengers and we've talked about them and we've placed them in the Georgia Bulldog universe, our last question, I have to beg the question. So exactly who's Thanos? We have our choices.
All right. That's the bad guy, right?
The bad guy. A, Nick Saban.
All right.
B, Dabo Swindy. C, Trevor Lawrence. D, the transfer portal.
Like it.
E, championship game refs.
I'll allow it.
Or F, Athens Clark County Police Department.
Too soon on that. So for me, this is about that next foe to vanquish. And maybe at one point in time, Dabo Swinney will be Georgia's biggest foe, and who knows how Trevor Lawrence factors into all that. But for now, there is no enemy that Georgia needs to take down more so than Nick Saban, because he's caused more pain, he's caused more anguish, he's caused more heartache. It may be Dabo Swinney after 2019, but for now, Georgia's version of Thanos is Nick Saban. That is the foe that must be defeated. Saban.
Correct.
Yeah, Saban.
Correct.
I like that one. That's pretty good. Well done.
Got a little comedic hour in the back end of that.
I like that.
A little bit.
I like that. All right, good stuff. So now it's your chance to comedic hour, anything you want to do. Here on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger, we like to give you a chance to sound off and have your say. We'll even include someone as a winner of our $50 Kroger How About Them Groceries gift card. So let's put 5 minutes on the clock and let's get ready to roll through some of that right now. By the way, Charles Kaiser, James Crumple, earlier in the show, noticed that Miles Murphy was not as a part of our top 2020 targets. What's your response to that?
He's right there on the edge. I think Georgia's going to play from behind a little bit in that recruiting, so that's why he's not seen on the top targets. He was actually, I think, 10 on the last one we did, so he's kind of hanging on there. But for now, I think Georgia has some ground to make up on other schools.
Mike Jones asked earlier in the program if you had any thoughts on Jermaine Burton selecting LSU.
Great fit for him. I think he wants to be an LSU legacy type receiver. He'll obviously get the chance to do so playing in a formation, in a team, an offensive concept that likes to run the ball a lot. Maybe could be another OBJ type for the LSU Tigers. He's going to be very good.
Pine Salt Lemon sent on YouTube says he thought Georgia's Thanos was the transfer portal because it's collecting players left and right. Do you think it's going to collect a Georgia player now that spring practice is over?
Yeah, I think there will be players at every school that at least check out the transfer portal post spring practice.
AJ Ferraro, let me get AJ's comment one more time here. AJ Ferraro says if Mays or Sawyer steals one of those 5 offensive line spots, who is left out? Who's the most likely of the 5 that started for the red team on G-Day not to start against Vanderbilt and Nashville to start the season?
I think I want to answer this one with the truest thing I can say. I think the most up for grab jobs on the Georgia starting offensive line, I think it would be right guard and right tackle.
I will say, though, that I'm a big believer that the 5 you saw for the red team on Saturday, that is the 5 barring injury that will start against Vanderbilt. That is my prediction. Kibo Weir says, how about a surprise starter for the upcoming season, either side of the ball, I think?
Surprise starter. I would probably put a Blaylock or George Pickens in there as a surprise starter, maybe even a Matt Landers. I know that's saying a lot on kids that just show up in June. You think Dominic Blaylock could be a starter at punt returner. That's why I start thinking about that. I don't know if Trayvon Walker can get there that fast. Depends on how healthy Mikhail Carter and Julian Rochester are. That's the best I have for you there.
Chuck Pearson says, who's the big commit that's coming? Rumors out there of commitment videos, things like that. Anything to say about that, Jeff?
We got a mic issue here.
Oh, no.
We got a mic issue here. I got one for you from YouTube from Bryan Kephart. Jeff, how likely do I think, honestly, UGA is able to flip Bresee by February? I don't think anything's happening with Bresee. I think that one is done. That ship is sailed, just like Owen Popo to Auburn.
Over here, back on YouTube again. Actually, let me pop back over to Facebook again for a moment. Can I see what's going on over there? A lot of folks talking about a lot of different things. Michael Harm wants to know about Zamir White. What's your prognosis for Zeus after spring practice is over? I
think he's going to have, I think I've said this on one of our platforms before, I think Zeus will be ready to go should Georgia need him by Vanderbilt by that first game. If they need him, maybe he'll be brought in gradually, but man, that guy looks put together. I think he's really somewhere between 235 and 240. I think reasonably for Georgia, they play 14 or 15 games. I think 75 to 100 carries is probably the sweet spot for him right there.
James Crump asking about B.J. Ojulari. How much is Georgia recruiting him right now? Is it a defensive end or as a linebacker?
Well, here's what I think. It's definitely as an outside linebacker. And one little pieces of information I haven't even put on the forum yet or anywhere yet is B.J. Ojulari. It's told me. Now, he's a guy that I think comes back closer into the core of Georgia's class a little bit because, maybe Bresee is going this way, maybe Miles Murphy is going another way. B.J. Ojulari told me where earlier this spring he said he wanted to make his commitment in April. He's now decided to pump the brakes on that and see what happens with a lot of schools he likes. He's going to push back his commitment a little bit. It might even drag into the season.
C.J. Oran says, why is Micaiah Tongue always overlooked when it comes to the incoming freshman? That's a good question. Tongue is another one of these potential receivers that's going to arrive this summer.
Again, we said earlier that Georgia had a preferred walk-on, a very valuable part of the team, but yet preferred walk-on nonetheless, not even a scholarship receiver as part of one of the starting units at G-Day. That's why I think Micaiah Tongue, now I don't know if he's going to excel like Pickens and flash like Pickens and Blaylock will early on as a receiver. He might because of the way he'll block, because he's a physical player. But I think Micaiah Tongue, within 1 to 2 years, might be one of the very best special teams player that Georgia has on its entire roster.
I also think he could be a heck of a defensive back if he wanted to be, but that's probably going to end up being his choice if he decides he wants to make that. A question came in a moment ago from Charles Geiser about the chances that Georgia gets the #1 class this year. Just given the small number of recruits that Georgia can sign, that hurts you to be #1, right?
I think Georgia 2 or 3 is probably where they land. They'll be limited by how many guys they can sign, and Clemson is just going to keep reeling in dudes. This is going to be the summer of Dabo, like we've talked about over at the forum a lot. Clemson's going to have a lot of momentum, and Georgia's momentum may come later in the season. Brandon and I have a couple that from the Dog Nation forum. We have a thread up. One of them is who are the 2020 defensive tackles that Georgia is now rating as their gets for the program. Now that a certain young man from Maryland is now committed to Clemson. Christopher, thanks in advance for your answer. Thanks in advance for your question, Christopher. I think the names there are Jay Hardy, he's out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Jalen Carter, he's out of Apopka, Florida. He was at G-Day. I think Alex Huntley is another guy.
That's a teammate of Jordan Burch, is that correct?
Teammate out of Jordan Burch. Jordan Burch was the 5-star DN that was also in Athens for G-Day as well. I think right now those are some of the bigger names, potential names for Georgia at defensive tackle. Of course, they've already got Jamil Burrows as well as a commitment for the 2020 class.
All right, what do you say we give our Kroger $50 How About Them Groceries gift card to our buddy Kibo Weir? Kibo used to comment a lot. I haven't seen as much of Kibo as of late, so let's toss the $50 card Kibo's way.
Kibo's on Facebook, correct? Mm-hmm. Kibo, we'll try to reach out to you on Facebook and get you a $50 How About Them Groceries gift card. And your buddy Brandon, he picked it out for you.
Final thought from you as we get ready to wrap up here today?
I think things will start to move a little bit better now. I think it's funny how you and I had the conversation a while back on the air that would 2 be enough for everybody around the G-Day weekend? Is that enough commitments for everybody? Some kids just want to work on their own timetable, and you got to respect that as well. I think, though, Bresee has made his move. I think it kind of clears up a lot of things now for Georgia in terms of priorities and maybe the targets that they will really actively pursue going forward.
That is Jeff Sintel. He'll have a lot more recruiting coverage for you coming up the days ahead at DogNation.com. I will see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for Dog Nation Daily Live right here on the Dog Nation video channels or available as a podcast wherever you find them. And then again, back here again next week for another episode of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger as we look at all the twists and turns of the UGA recruiting cycle as we head towards the stretch run for the class of 2020. We'll look forward to doing that with you then. Thanks for being with us here today.